Welcome to a conversation about atheists and faith on Ask the Expert. I'm your host, Eric Hovind with CreationToday.org. I recently listened to a conversation between Christian apologist Dr. Sean McDowell and a well-known YouTube atheist, Hemant Mehta, as they joined Justin Brierley on his unbelievable conference tour of the United States. Several of the points in the conversation intrigued me, and I thought you'd enjoy talking them through with one of the participants in that conversation, Dr. Sean McDowell. Sean, thanks for joining me today, man.
Eric, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm always curious how conversations like this come up. Christian apologist yourself, a YouTube atheist that's pretty well known, coming out on stage. Can you kind of give us the backstory to how this conversation took place?
Sure. So Justin Brierley in the UK has a very popular podcast called Unbelievable, and regularly has on Christians and, say, a Muslim or an atheist or somebody of a different perspective to debate the issues of the day. And I've been on his show probably 4 or 5 times with people like Bart Campolo, Ryan Bell, and others. And he invited me to the first U.S. conference in Portland. And he said, would you have a dialogue Friday night? I said, sure. I love these conversations, actually more than formal debates, even though I've done those. And we started throwing around names, and we kind of, and interaction with the pastor in Portland, thought, you know what, some of these aggressive atheists might not fit kind of the Portland ethos, so to speak. So let's find somebody who is going to push back and have opinions, but have a friendly conversation. And instantly I thought, well, there's this guy who calls himself the friendly atheist. He's kind of wedded to that name, and I've seen him interact, and he's gracious, even though he has very strong opinions. So we floated out there to him, invited him, and he was pretty quick to say, yeah, as long as it's not a formal debate and we get to talk and interact and it's not a gotcha kind of environment, he said he'd do it. And the church got behind it and made it happen.
Your 2 misconceptions that you gave to him, and he had not heard them before, and I enjoyed the conversation on. The second one was Christianity is inherently in conflict with science. Discuss that, and why did you use that as one of the many misconceptions we could say that an unbeliever, an atheist has about the Christian worldview? Why was that one one of your top 2 that you used there in the conversation?
Well, atheists all the time talk about how they're on the side of science and reason and evidence, and Christians are anti-science. And I want to make the point that historically the scientific revolution was actually birthed in a culture shaped by certain presuppositions that only make sense in a Christian worldview. Of course, atheists can do science, but they have to borrow from the world being reasonable, our minds being designed to understand the world, a certain moral ethic, etc., to even do science. And then second, I want to say Christians might differ based on their theology with certain scientific conclusions, but that doesn't mean Christianity itself is inherently at odds with science. So I argued it's basically a surface contradiction, but it's not a deep contradiction. In fact, if I had time, I would have said the deep contradiction is actually between naturalism and science, but we didn't have a time to go there.
Well, I thought that was a great point to bring up. Your second point, your first point that led into that one is what I'd like to spend just a little bit of time on, and that's the concept that you said science and faith are not at odds. How did you actually, you said something like faith is not opposed to science, or how did you word that in your first misconception?
I was very careful. Well, so the first one was about faith being at odds with evidence.
Yes,
the second one I worded very carefully that there's no inherent conflict between science and between Christianity. And his pushback was, look, you believe in a virgin birth, therefore you can't believe in science. And I think that's just a complete misunderstanding of what a miracle is, what it means for the supernatural to act, and what science in its own limited realm, so to speak, can actually prove. So I just pushed back and I said, if there's a God who exists, just if, I don't even have to prove God exists. If there's a God, and this God is rational and orderly, and he spoke the universe into existence and made the laws of biology and physics and chemistry. If this God exists and designed the world as it is, why is this God all of a sudden bound by these laws that he made? And if God acts above and beyond these laws, is violating science? He's not. If he made it and God exists, he can clearly do a miracle. In fact, miracles, ironically, only make sense if the world is orderly. if the world is regular, if these things happen 99+% of the time. So ironically, miracles actually support the regularity of nature, which you need to have science.
So I find this interesting. It sounded like it came out again, and this is what I've heard regularly, miracles can't happen because they are miracles. And it's really arguing with the definition of the word, saying that if it happens, it can't be supernatural. And they're kind of going against the very definition of a miracle. Is that kind of how you would describe it when the argument actually comes?
Well, the definition is very important because Hume famously defined miracles as a violation of the laws of nature. So if you define a miracle as like an interference or a violation, then you're automatically assuming God is outside of these laws and can't operate within them. If he does, the entire edifice of these laws break down. But that's not really what they are. In his 2-volume set on miracles, Craig Keener says it's a supernatural event that's extraordinary. That's all that it is. So I use the example of, the laws of physics and nature seem to operate within themselves on a regular basis. But if I take a ball and I drop it and I catch it, I, as an agent, have acted through these laws. I didn't violate them. I just acted above them and say beyond them in a way that shows there's more to reality than what science itself can explain and describe in terms of behavior and actions.
Now, Hemant responded to that and he said, okay, if God can do that, then you can't do science. That's his response. If God's allowed to interrupt, then it's impossible to do science. What would you say to that?
I'd say, well, look at some of the greatest scientific pioneers throughout history. People like Newton, people like Pascal, Kepler, Boyle, on, believed that God could intervene and they could do science. So historically, this is just false. And second, if there's a miracle, again, it shows that the world is regular. And I like Dembski's explanatory filter, even though he used it for intelligent design, it kind of applies to a miracle, is that you look first for a natural explanation. None of us, no scientist looking through looking through a microscope as a Christian just assumes everything is miraculous intervention by God. No, they assume that things operate according to normal laws. But when they come across certain features in a cell, or they come across something in the laws of physics, and not only can nature not explain it, but it has the positive imprint of intelligent design or an intelligent agent, then the only reason you can rule that out is if you have some preliminary commitment to naturalism that says I'm closed to even the possibility of the miracle. That's not science, that's philosophy, and it's bad philosophy at that.
This is going to be coming out on the Unbelievable podcast, is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually already up on YouTube. You can watch the entire thing, but the podcast, I think either this week or next week, probably the following Saturday, it'll be up to listen to.
So if you do a search on YouTube or go to the Unbelievable podcast and subscribe there, fantastic podcast, great conversations. Do a search for Sean McDowell and Hemant Mehta, and you'll get to enjoy the conversation that I got to listen to. Sean, how do we need to use the model that you did as kind of an example of the graciousness? Because I think many times, I guess I'll preface that question with many times we are studying apologetics. People study apologetics in order to win a debate rather than in order to try to bring about using it as persuasion technique. Because I thought you did a good job with the conversation. Can you address that?
Well, I love apologetics. You love apologetics. Probably a lot of people that listen to your show love apologetics. And we tend to, by nature, be the kind of people who want to argue and reason and think things through. And I've made a lot of mistakes of that in my life, pushing an issue, not realizing that there's a human that's right there, and not really asking the question, what is this person's barrier to Christ? So I think an apologist today, especially in our culture that's so divisive, it's so heated. I was watching the hearings about Kavanaugh and people yelling. It's just, we are seeing almost moment by moment the breakdown of civility in our culture, and it's disheartening. And if there's anybody in the culture that should have firm convictions but have gentleness and kindness, my President Biola, he says we need to be firm in the center but soft on the edges. That's what we're called to do. I'm not going to back down from truth. We even got into the issue of same-sex marriage a little bit, and I knew he was going to get upset about that, but I'm not going to apologize because I have thoughtful reasons why I hold to natural marriage. But I'm not going to speak it with vitriol. I'm going to speak it with kindness. I'm going to speak it with graciousness. And I don't think there's a lot of models in our world today of people that do this. So one reason we don't have these conversations is we don't know what we believe and why, and we're afraid somebody's going to poke holes in our views, and then we get defensive. That's one reason why. The other one is we're argumentative. And as Christians, sometimes we're angry. Sometimes we want to win an argument more than we want to love a person. So I think we have to do some serious soul searching. I think we have to do apologetics with a spirit of prayer, with a spirit of brokenness. And I think if we approach it that way, the pressure's off me. I mean, I didn't really feel like I had to shine and look great. It wasn't really about me, Eric. I can honestly tell you, I got up there and just said, you know what, I want to speak truth. God, use me. Give me the words to say. Help me love him. And love means speaking the truth, but it also means being gentle and being kind. And I fall short of that, but especially in our culture today, that's who I think the most effective apologist should aim to be.
Well, that kind of leads into my last question for you on this. I understand as people have conversations with people that disagree, and this is in any realm, but especially in apologetics, when you're dealing with deeply held religious beliefs, there is the tendency to get frustrated when you know I've got the truth and you can't see it. So how do you handle when you find yourself getting that feeling of frustration, that feeling of, I know I'm right and you're not believing me? How do you handle that feeling when it comes up?
Well, I do a few things. Number one, I ask myself, am I really sure that I'm right? Am I being unnecessarily dogmatic? Have I done my homework? Am I willing to change if I'm wrong on this? And it's only when I ask those questions that I think I can have sympathy and kindness towards somebody who's not that way. Second, I also remember that there's a spiritual battle that's going on. It's spiritual. I mean, I think of the blind man who was physically blind, not just spiritually blind. He says, all I know is I was blind, but now I see.
Yeah.
I can't make anybody believe anything. It doesn't matter how persuasive I am, Eric. It doesn't matter how many people I cite or statistics I give. If God is not working on that person's heart, if that person is not open to it, I can't change him. So that's not my job. I can alleviate some of that frustration in my mind, and I do feel that frustration. I have to fight it by just saying, all my job is to do is to love this person, to speak truth, to self-reflect and ask, am I doing something that's untoward the truth or the cause of Christ, and be willing to change it. That's all I can do. And I have enough experience with people over years who've held dogmatic views and pushed back, who over time have changed their minds. And sometimes God works on somebody's heart for a long, long time before they come over. So we have to have gentleness with people. We have to have graciousness with people. And there's so many times, Eric, I heard a story this summer about somebody who picked up a book that I wrote. The wife had become a Christian. The husband was against it, wouldn't go to church, and finally randomly picks up a copy of one of my books that someone gave his wife. He's sitting at home with nothing to do, reads it, and all of a sudden becomes a Christian and wants to go to church. Well, all these people in his life for years had been working on him, and they should, and that played a piece of it. But all of a sudden he's open, all of a sudden the Spirit moves, and he ends up coming to Christ. So if we have this longer term view, realize God is the one who changed somebody's heart, realize that we're just called to be faithful, I think it's very freeing that I can't change anybody's mind. The rich young ruler walked away from Jesus in the flesh. You don't think people will walk away from us?
That is a great point and a great way to end this by reminding everybody, when you have your conversations, do it with gentleness and respect. Do it with love. I think you need to look up the conversation that Sean had with Hemant and enjoy that. And as always, if you want to get more information, I'm going to one-up Justin Briley here. Go to SeanMcDowell.org, because he got it wrong. He said .com. Go to SeanMcDowell.org and check out some of the things Sean has written in a way that I think very lovingly and intelligently reflects how to defend Christianity. Sean, thanks for doing that conversation, and thanks for being a part of Ask the Experts.
It's my pleasure. Sure appreciate you, Eric. Thanks for having me on.